Hey everybody, it's Elsie, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different. So, I didn't really intend to start a YouTube channel. The reason I started using YouTube was so that I could have the video online somewhere if I was making a blog post or making one of my newsletters, just a place to put the video so that I could embed it. But now that I've started doing these Sunday morning joy videos, I feel like now I've kind of started a channel. So I realize that I have never really introduced myself. So I'm going to start doing that in this video. You know, I've had a pretty action-packed or just like I've done a lot of things in my life, and I'm a really complex person. There's a lot of things about me that make me who I am. And so it might take more than one video to cover that. I'm sure it will. So this is kind of part one of that. And I'm also going to touch on one other subject before the end of the video. And at the end, I am going to read some very sweet inspirational passages out of a little book that I have. So that will be together, that will be your Sunday sermon and your Sunday joy. So about me, I grew up on a small dairy farm in the great state of Vermont. And growing up on a dairy farm in Vermont in the 80s was a very unique experience. Growing up on a farm in Vermont or the farm that I grew up on in Vermont, can be very isolating. There wasn't a grocery store for like 35 to 40 minutes from my house. I was really in the middle of nowhere. And along with it being isolating, it was safe. It was really, really safe. There was no crime. Like where I lived, you know, everyone left their doors unlocked and everyone was very neighborly. It was a community. Vermont's always been kind of a live and let live kind of place, but also if your neighbors need something, you're always there for them. Like, for instance, when I was a baby in 1973, our barn caught on fire. And a friend of the family remembers it was a little bit away from the house, but I mean, it was across the yard. And she remembers watching me, you know, crawling on the front porch and, you know, being worried that like the house might catch on fire, you know. But after that, the whole community got together and helped my dad and my family build a new barn for us. So that's the kind of things that Vermonters do. I kind of joke that, you know, in Florida, my friends will help me move to a new apartment, but in Vermont, they would help you build a new house. So it's just, you know, not good or bad, just Vermonters are really community oriented, you know. So I grew up in the most beautiful natural place that you can imagine. We had 200 acres of farmland and woods, and as a child I was free to roam around it by myself or with my siblings, and you know, just we built a fort in the woods and just ran around. Unfortunately, the town was really spread out, so there were no friends' houses that I could walk to or ride my bike to, but I did have a niece my age and some siblings, and so we had the run of the place pretty much. The center of this town that I grew up in still to this day looks like the set of Little House on the Prairie. It is a tiny little town center, which a lot of little towns in Vermont don't even have a center. It's just like this bunch of, you know, land with houses spread out on it is a town. But my town had a little town center, and there was a little schoolhouse, a little church, a little fire department, a little snack bar. It really was very quaint. I remember dating a guy in my 30s who grew up in Ireland, which is the most quaint place I can think of on the planet. And I took him there and he was like, oh, this is crazy. You know, it's so quaint. So I went to a 2-room schoolhouse, which most people my age, I'm a Gen Xer, I'm gonna be 50 in February. Most people my age did not go to a 2-room schoolhouse. So it was just a very unique experience that I had, you know. And after that, I went to like a normal high school. Vermont has union high schools, which is a high school in a rural area where all of the kids from all the little farm towns, all little rural towns, all go to. Okay, so like there was a little city next to where I lived called Rutland, and they had Rutland High School, but it was just kids from Rutland. So mine was a union high school, and we had all these kids from rural towns who went to it. The downside of growing up in a place like that is that you are in some ways, I mean in many ways, isolated from like what's going on in the real world. You know, there was no cable when I was growing up. I could not get MTV at my house. We got 3 stations using an antenna. It was ABC, CBS, and NBC. And we could get the local like PBS channel if we switched over to UHF from VHF on the antenna. So I got to experience some pop culture because I got to watch all the sitcoms, you know, at the time, but nothing like MTV or any other station that was there at the time that wouldn't come in with our antenna. So I think that's why sometimes people in rural areas grow up with a very small idea about the world, and not just about the world, but also about what they're capable of. You know, even the little city, my friends in Sarasota used to make me put it in air quotes because it was only like 16 or 17,000 people. But even there was not a lot of opportunity when I was growing up there. There's more now, but it was very patriarchal. And I grew up as the internet grew up, basically. I grew up as the personal computer grew up. I remember in my grade school, we had one of the first, you know, PCs that like a person could own, right? That wasn't like a room full of servers. So I got to play with that a little bit, and I must have had an aptitude for it, and my parents could see that because they ended up buying me one of the first personal computers, the TRS-80 Color Computer 2, that was available, and that felt very extravagant for my farm family. But I don't think, and I do think it's timing, like part timing. No, none of my siblings showed an interest in that, and there was not an emphasis. There was an emphasis in my household on getting your high school education and doing the best that you could and learning. My mother actually had a kindergarten in our house, or a preschool or whatever, while I was young, and she taught me how to, you know, read and write before I even got to first grade. And she had actually gone to like 1.5 years of college. And I think her sisters might have both gone to college. I don't know. But the emphasis wasn't on like, you're going to go on to college and then you're going to do amazing things. Because people in my family mostly didn't do that. I had an uncle who did that, and he kind of became an entrepreneur, but even that was based on the idea of what an entrepreneur was in Vermont, okay, or in rural Vermont or whatever. So I was, okay, back to so I was interested in computers. My parents bought me, like, which I think changed the course of my life. I'm gonna be honest. They bought me a computer that would not do anything. Okay, it was basically just a keyboard that had a cartridge hole in the side that you hooked up to your TV, and it would not do anything unless you programmed it to do that. And I don't even think you could save the program at the time that I got it. So I don't even know what kind of program it would have been at the time. Basic, who knows? But I had this book, and I had this thing, and I could make it do things, and it was cool. And eventually you could get games for it. And so I could put games in the cartridge holder, you know, and I had things to run the games. And so I could do that. And eventually I think I outgrew that, or, you know, when I got to high school, I just wasn't doing that anymore, and eventually I don't even remember what happened to it. Maybe I gave it to someone, I don't know. But I kind of put that out of my mind for a while, and later came back to it, which will be another part of this story. So I do have a few visuals because I like visuals. So these are my parents. They both passed away last year. So this is my dad, the retired farmer, who lived to be 91 years old, which is, farmers have a very rough life, but they also have good genes sometimes. So I think I got the good farm genes because I haven't had COVID yet. So my dad came from a family that was very stoic, and they did not hug or say I love you. My dad, I don't remember him hugging me as a child, really, unless my mom like made me hug him like good night or something. So he just wasn't an emotional person, and the way he showed his love was just by supporting our family financially, just with the farm, which, you know, obviously it was a farm, but, you know, he was the provider, and he spent most of his time running a farm, which is really, really hard, and just didn't have a lot to give other than that, you know. And he was never abusive, not a mean, I mean, sometimes he was a little, sometimes he could joke with you in ways that didn't feel good. But he wasn't an abusive person or mean or anything like that. Never physical, very gentle man. So, but it was hard. It's hard as a young girl to not have someone in your life that's more supportive, a male in your life that's more supportive, I should say. And he wasn't the type of person to say, I'm proud of you. But I had another parent, my mom. Okay, so that was an Amber Alert that I didn't realize was gonna stop my video, but it did. So I'm back. So I can't remember what I just said, but I was talking about my parents and how my dad was not a very emotional person, and he provided for my family with the farm and didn't have much to give other than that. So he was not a very supportive person. He wouldn't say, I'm proud of you. And, you know, his dad didn't tell him he was proud of him either. His dad gave him a lot of shit, you know. I think partly because my dad, I think, enjoyed being a bachelor. He used to fly a plane, a Piper Cub. He had a pilot's license. He had a little red Volkswagen Beetle. He had motorcycles. And I think he was really enjoying being single, but my grandfather needed someone to take over the farm. And my dad's only brother had, I think he went to college, I don't remember, but he became a businessman, an entrepreneur. He owned a lot of properties and he owned a business. And so he wasn't gonna take over the farm. And so my dad was sort of the only one to take over the farm. And you can't run a farm as a bachelor, you know, that's just not what people do. You get married and have children and they help you run the farm, you know, and your wife helps with like the business end and, you know, taking care of the house and all that kind of stuff, you know, very traditional. My parents were old, very traditional roles for people on a farm. So my dad got married late, like maybe 35, I don't know. Or maybe that's when he had me. Anyway, he was much older than most people then got married. And so him and my mom got together, and she, you know, was the farm wife basically. But so my dad didn't have a lot of emotion to give, and but my mom did. So my mom was a very bubbly, goofy, sweet, wonderful saint of a woman, and she was very affectionate and she hugged us all the time, and she was, you know, she was the brightness in our life, and it offset what we didn't get from my dad. Yeah, my mom was just really goofy and she loved children, and she loved people and being social, even though she would not tell you that. So yeah, and so I had 4 siblings, one of whom was much older than me, so I didn't even really grow up with her. I more grew up with her daughter, who is my age. And so that's my parents and my childhood. And then when I was 10, my mother, you know, it's hard for someone who's chipper and bubbly to be with someone who is not emotionally available and works all the time, you know, and when you work all the time, you're not in a good mood a lot of the time. And and they weren't good communicators. I mean, my dad's family just didn't communicate, but my mom's family, to be fair, not great either. So, you know, not talking as a couple is almost as bad as like arguing all the time, right? Because you're not even communicating your frustrations sometimes. You're just bottling them up, right? You're just stuffing them down, okay? So apparently when I was a baby, my mom had thought about leaving my dad, but then she didn't, because she, like many women, didn't want to leave her children. And I mean, she would have had to take me with her. I was a baby. So when I was 10, she decided she definitely was going to leave my dad. And so the way she did it, though, left me with trauma that I still have, but that I recognize, and I just tell people about it now. Like, you know, if I'm in a relationship and they do something, you know, repeatedly that triggers it, I'm like, hey, could you do that differently? So when I was 10, I went to school one day. I went to grade school, okay, to my 2-room schoolhouse. And my teacher said that she was gonna take me, I forget exactly how it happened, but my teacher after school took me into Rutland, and my mom was there and my next oldest sister. and my mom told me that she was leaving. And I had like 18 hours notice of when I found out my mom was leaving. And she wasn't just leaving my dad, she was leaving the state. And the next morning, I got up and my teacher picked me up and took me to school, and my mom was no longer gonna be there. So it was very, very traumatizing for me, because my mom was the light in my life, and my dad did not even know how to be a parent. So it was so hard. It was so hard for me. You can ask my siblings, because I was the baby, and you know, some of them were already practically out of the house, and which was even worse, because then I was just there with my dad, who, as you can imagine, was crushed. And I don't blame my mom now. At the time, obviously, I was very angry. I was like, why would you do this? Like, this is like a horrible punishment, you know, not just that you're gone, but that now I'm here with him. And he's like a rock, you know. So it was really, really painful for me. And I was angry. And in my family, they do not like to express emotions, mostly negative ones. They don't like to talk about things. They think if you're angry, it's selfish of you to disrupt the harmony, like there was harmony to begin with, disrupt the harmony of the household. And so it was around that time that, like, I was shamed at 10 for being angry that my mom left. And that's caused like probably lifelong issues in my life of just feeling like my feelings aren't valid. Like I'm not allowed to feel things, you know? And so it was, yeah. I think it was also perhaps the start of when I felt different than my family. And I felt like, you guys are the ones that are screwed up, not me. Like, I'm just over here trying to be a normal person and have like normal emotions that someone would have if this happened to them. So that's just a very interesting, I kind of just thought of that observation, but this is little, poor little 10-year-old Elsie, who was very angry and heartbroken about my mom leaving. And again, I have forgiven my mom. I forgave her a long time ago. Her and I have talked about it and cried about it. And I'm like, yeah, dude, like sometimes you just have to do what's right for you, because I would rather have a mom that did what she had to do to not just be miserable, you know, and for her to give me the example of it's okay. It's better for you as a parent to be happy and whole than to stay and be miserable. Like, don't be miserable for me, you know, like I would hate for later in life, my mom have told me I lived a hollow life so that I could stay for you. You know, that's like way worse. So while it traumatized me and left me with some issues in life, it was not on purpose. She didn't do that to hurt me. She did that for herself. And so that was an example that I could respect and be proud of. Yeah. So after that, I unfortunately, because I was, again, the youngest and kind of the one who was there the most, I kind of became my dad's surrogate wife. Not in like a gross way, but just in like the, now instead of this man who's my father taking care of me, I am taking care of him, because my mom used to do everything for him, you know, cook and clean and buy groceries and balance his checkbook and write checks. And I started doing all that stuff. And with him, of course, I was 10. I couldn't drive, but like throughout the next however many years, we lived on the farm until I was 16. So at least until then, I also had to, you know, help out on the farm. Again, I was the only one there. So I helped him milk the cows after school in the evenings. And it was a lot. It was a lot for someone my age, and just to be taking care of the adult who was supposed to be taking care of me. But my dad was not. My dad had an 8th grade education and he was smart. He could have done more than that, but his dad needed his help on the farm, and he would have had to walk like a couple miles every day to get to the high school that was in a town over. And it was a very treacherous road too. So it's hard also to feel more sophisticated than your parents, which I did, not at that age, but at a very young age. I just realized like my parents grew up in a different time and in a very isolated place, and they're not very sophisticated. And sometimes I feel resentful about that. You don't get to choose who your parents are. But I get jealous of people who tell me all of this wisdom that their parents gave to them, and their parents were professionals and could give them business advice and investing advice and just advice about everything in life. But my parents lived in a completely different universe than that, you know? So I spent a lot of my life trying to learn all the things that some people come out of childhood knowing, just come out of high school knowing, and having confidence about, you know? So I do feel like I spent a lot of my life catching up. And I know it's not my parents' fault. Again, they're the product of their parents and all of that and how they grew up. It's all very random who your parents are, where you're born, what you have, where you go to school, all of that stuff. Like, it's all random, and I know that. And so yeah. So after my mom left, and you know, I did start to, you know, if you don't get any positive attention from your parent, then you might look for negative attention. So I did start acting out, and he still didn't notice. So you know, I wasn't a horrible child, but I did like start drinking at a pretty young age, and hanging out with boys at a young age, which I wish I hadn't, but it is what it is. And just trying, and some of it too was trying to get attention from anybody. Just like, would someone acknowledge my existence? You know, would someone show me affection? Because at that point, then I was getting nothing, right? My mom was gone and most of my siblings weren't around. So I was getting no physical attention or no praise, nothing positive. It really, I look back and I think I must have been so low. And I lived in Vermont too, like no vitamin, no sun, you know, not a lot of sunshine. So at the time, I'm sure my endorphin level was so low, my serotonin, every positive chemical in my body must have been just like literally negative. Okay, so I was a very emotional child. You know, I'm sure partly because of all this, and even in my 20s, a very emotionally tumultuous time for me, and just trying to get the attention, the affection and attention that I desperately needed, because people need that. Like, it's super important. And I just was desperate for it, you know, like, so I will say that during that time, like, my mom did come back, tried to come back to my dad. So after she left, she ended up becoming a nanny for a wealthy woman in Long Island who was an editor for Newsday, which at the time was actually, you know, pretty impressive. And so I will say that stung a lot too, is that my mom left and now she's taking care of someone else's child. So that kind of stung too. But eventually, I don't really remember how it all happened, but she decided to try again with my dad. Now my dad, no one else wanted him. If you meet my dad, you can immediately tell that he is a joy suck, okay? So he tried going on some dates. I think he answered some ads in the classified, because that's what you did back then. But, you know, I think women could immediately tell that my dad was not a happy person. Like, just, yeah. So, so my mom came back, but then she left again. Then she came back, and then she left again. I think she might have done it 3 times. So the last time she came back, I don't know if she convinced him, but my dad ended up selling the farm. And that's a whole story, but he moved to an adjacent town and they bought a little ranch house. And then she finally, I think she said to me, like, should I divorce your father? I'm like, yes, you guys are a terrible couple. You know what I mean? Like, you're not good for each other. Well, you're good for him, but he's not good for you. So she divorced him, and my dad was really angry. I don't know if he was angry because he had sold the farm and hadn't wanted to, but he was really angry. And I was 16 years old and maybe 17 at the time. And I was the only one still living with him. I'm the only one who moved with him from the farm because I was still in high school. And he would say things to me about my mother and insinuated that maybe I would be just like her. And they were very, very hurtful things to say to a teenage girl. And it actually took me a really, really long time to forgive him for that. But my dad doesn't have social skills. My dad doesn't know what emotional intelligence is. He just knows what it feels like to be hurt. And so I really, really kind of hated my dad for a while. And I was stuck there living with him. And yeah, you just don't want to hear your dad say certain things to you, you know, especially when he hasn't been especially loving the rest of the time. You know, it'd be one thing. And I don't think he ever really apologized for saying those things, even though I'm sure he did not mean them the way they came out. It really made me hate him. Because you don't forget. I still remember. I remember standing there. I can see myself, you know, at 17 in my dad's kitchen, listening to him say these things and just being so angry. And it's like, my family's terrible at communicating, but the one time you express yourself, it's to just be cruel, you know? And so I had started going to college then, actually, and for a variety of reasons, it didn't work out. I didn't feel motivated, again, because I didn't even know what I wanted to do. There was nothing. I had never seen a female other than that woman in Long Island. I'd never seen a female in my area doing anything, not courageous, but just like doing anything other than just working at a job. And so I'm like, what's the point? Like, why am I even going to college? What am I going to do? Oh, so I'll tell you a little story. That woman in Long Island, so I would occasionally go visit my mom for the weekend. She lived in their house. She had a room. So I would just like, I don't know, sleep on the floor or whatever. And this woman who, you know, was her beautiful stone house in Long Island, in Great Neck, Long Island. Just like tons of money. And her daughter took ballet lessons, and I was like, that's so exotic, you know. And I was like 13 probably, and she said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, a secretary. And she looked me dead in the eyes and said, you don't want to be a secretary, you want to have a secretary. And I was like thinking to myself, what do you mean? I don't even understand how that would be possible, because I grew up in a place where women didn't have secretaries. Women were secretaries. And so, you know, at the time I was like, I don't think this woman understands my life, but I never ever forgot that. And I've never had a secretary, but I've done things that even in my 20s, I never ever dreamed I would ever do. And so, yeah, I forget where I was now. Right, so going to college. I started going to college when I was 17 because, all right, so here's another little segue story. I'll remember, I said I was going to college. Before my mom left, my dad, she sat down with my grade school teacher. And I had been working pretty much since first grade. I had been working ahead of my grade. So we had these like workbooks. There were workbooks for every grade. And so I would like finish the whole workbook for my grade. And so they would be like, okay, well, here's the workbook for next grade, you know? So at the time I might've been working, I was in 5th grade when my mom left, and I might've been working like 2 grades ahead. I think I was working on like 7th grade stuff. And then the teacher would have me helping other students. So my mother sat down with my teacher, who was like, our town was so small, like you knew everybody. So he was a good friend of ours. And she told him she was leaving my dad, and she was worried because I was so smart that if I kept going the way I was going, I would be very bored with learning, and that if she then left, I would have too much headspace that I might fill with going in the wrong direction, like getting in trouble or doing things I shouldn't be doing. And so together they decided that I would skip 6th grade and go right from my 2-room schoolhouse in 5th grade to 7th grade in the junior high, and even into the harder classes, so that I would be challenged and would have to. And she knew I was very, what's the word I'm looking for? Accomplishment oriented. So she must have known that about me, that if I did something, I wanted to do it really well. So that if I was in those classes, I would be trying really hard to succeed. So that's what they did. And she didn't tell me that for a long time afterward. And when she did, that also changed the course of my life. If she hadn't done that, I really don't think I would be sitting here today where I am in this, or have done all the things that I've done. So that was the biggest gift that my mom could have given me when she left. And I didn't even know about it for like, I don't even remember how old I was when she told me. But, so that was pretty amazing. Like, my mom was a really amazing person. Okay, I gotta calm down. Yeah, so I started college, and I was only 17 because I skipped a grade, okay? But I was born in February, so some of my classmates were born in December, so even though they were born in 72, I'm only 3 months younger than them, you know? So, you know, and my mom and my teacher were talked about whether I was mature enough, and I actually was friends with a lot of people in the grade above me, so they decided I was. So I started college, I was 17, but I didn't have any direction. Like, I didn't know what going to college was going to do for me in Vermont, and I didn't know what else was out there. There was no internet then. There were no cell phones. I got 3 stations on TV. Did I mention that? I got to look at the world in encyclopedias. Like, I told you, like, I grew up, you know, in a time and at a place where there just wasn't a lot of information about the world. So I'm like, I don't, you know, what am I going to do with this? And some of my friends had gone to college in other places, but that just didn't seem accessible to me, you know? So, I dropped out halfway through the first semester, but I didn't officially drop out, which would have been great. I just stopped going, because I was like, I'll be fine. This is totally fine, you know? Okay, so I think that's where I'm going to stop this story, is me dropping out of college when I was 17. But I have a lot more to tell, and I'm going to do that in other videos. So, I do want to do a little interjection here. I've had a couple responses to my 5,000 Hugs project that I want to talk about. And one of them is the $10 for the hug going to charity? So I will say that a portion of the proceeds are going to charity. But asking someone if their interactive art project benefits charity is like asking someone, a musician, does the money that I'm going to give you to come to this show go to charity? Or asking an artist, are you taking the money from this painting and giving it to charity? So this is my art project, and I actually donate to charity all the time. So even if a part of this project wasn't going to charity, it would anyway, because I donate to charity. So this is kind of like a Kickstarter. I know you guys know what a Kickstarter is. Maybe none of you have ever donated to a Kickstarter. But a Kickstarter can be for anything. So this is my Kickstarter, you know, for creating the Hugmobile, which I will use to spread joy everywhere. So the reason I didn't use Kickstarter, maybe people would think it was more legitimate if it was on Kickstarter, but I didn't use Kickstarter because A, they take a lot of the money, and I didn't want that to happen. And B, I'm a developer, so I can make my own Kickstarter, you know, which is what I did. So that was one of the comments, and it's legitimate, I guess. So the other comment, basically, well, let me just say this. If you're a creative person, you will understand this. If you're an artist or a creative person or a musician or anything, you don't owe the world your talent for free. What you do has value, and you need to live. Lots of people do things for free, and that's awesome. Like, I give free hugs all the time. Okay, I have for like at least a decade. But you don't owe anyone your beautiful, amazing talent for free. It's okay to make a living, even if it's off something that people think should be free, okay? Like, you don't have to do that. You can value yourself, and you can find people who value what you're doing. So I have lots of people around me who value what I'm doing and who have promoted it, like Paul. I really appreciate that. He is someone who believes in me and believes in what I'm doing and knows that I'm not some sort of weird scammer person, right? Like, I'm legit. So I'm telling you, if you're a creative, like, believe in yourself. I tell people, creative people, all the time to charge more money, because what they're doing is they're so talented, and what they're doing is so amazing and creative. It's like, you should charge more money for this because you've put so much heart and talent into it, and you don't have to give yourself away. So to the person over on Paul's channel who has his panties in a wad because I'm charging for this interactive art project, well, just like, get over yourself. Creative people deserve to get paid too. That's all I'm saying about that, okay? Now, I'm going to leave you with a couple readings out of this book by Thích Nhất Hạnh, who many of you will know who Thích Nhất Hạnh is. It's called How to Love. And I might have to take my glasses off. Okay, this one is called Opening the Door. Once you know how to come home to yourself, then you can open your home to other people because you have something to offer. The other person has to do exactly the same thing if they are to have something to offer you. Otherwise, they will have nothing to share but their loneliness, sickness, and suffering. This can't help heal you at all. The other person has to heal themselves and get warm inside so that they will feel better, at ease, and can share their home with you. All right, let's see. Oh, here we go. This one you'll recognize. It's called Digging Deep. Practicing loving kindness meditation is like digging deep into the ground until we reach the purest water. We look deeply into ourselves until insight arises and our love flows to the surface. Joy and happiness radiate from our eyes, and everyone around us benefits from our smile and our presence. If we take good care of ourselves, we help everyone. We stop being a source of suffering to the world, and we become a reservoir of joy and freshness. Here and there are people who know how to take good care of themselves, who live joyfully and happily. They are our strongest support. Whatever they do for everyone. All right, I'm just going to find one more. Okay, here's one. Are you sure? Other people's actions are the result of their own pain and not the result of any intention to hurt you. A wrong perception can be the cause of a lot of suffering. This is why whenever we have a perception, we have to ask ourselves if our perception is right. When we stand with friends looking at the setting sun, we're sure the sun has not set quite yet. But a scientist might tell us that the sun we're seeing is only the image of the sun of 8 minutes ago. We are subject to thousands of wrong perceptions like this in our daily lives. The next time you suffer and you believe that your suffering has been caused by the person you love the most, ask your loved one for help. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed hearing part of my story, and next week I will tell you a little more. Thanks so much. Love you guys.